So this is a companion bike to the blue Cannondale, the 23-inch. This one is a 25-inch frame, so that makes it, in this case, 63 centimeters or 67 centimeters, depending on how you measure it. So 62 or 63 to the top of the top tube, 67 to the top of the seat tube. This has a sticker on it here called an ST500. This is also 1985. So we won't fall into the trap of the rebuild on this bike that we did before. So the chain is rusted. I have washed the bike already, but we'll clean up the chain. This one has a plastic chain guard. It still looks to be in pretty good shape. So we'll clean this up. We'll true the rear wheel, true up both wheels, and put on new Schreiber Marathon tires. This also has the Modolo Flash rear brakes on it. The Sugino half-step crankset with a granny gear. The Huret Duopar Eco. Okay, it has the specialized quick release and sealed crank. This also has the Suntour sealed bottom bracket. Has the front specialized quick release skewer and sealed front hub with the Suntour Barcon shifters, the upgraded die-comp, grand comp brake levers. It has the plastic cable guides. In the front, the Modolo Flash, which are standard on this bike, and the road bars. So we'll replace the cables, front and rear brakes, front and rear shifters. We'll add tape to this. We'll remove the rear view mirror, and on the saddle we'll take away the cover. It has a rear bar bag and a coil lock that I don't have the key for. So, not falling in the trap of the blue bike, we should get this one through pretty quick. Okay, I'm remaking this sequence of videos because the camera that I was using had autofocus problems. So let's get right into it. So I added a drop of chain lube on every link here, and the chain's cleaned up pretty well. And before I added the lube, I rubbed it with a wire brush on all four sides, the tops, the bottoms, the inside and the outside plate. Okay, and then you pedal through to get this all cleaned up. So to clean the rust off of the freewheels, use a large wire brush, and you can brush, and the gears will backpedal. You can use a smaller brush also, and that works fine. Okay, and do this until you get to the condition that you want. The pivots on this Duopar are finicky, and so initially the cage wouldn't take up, and so I had to add a lot of lube here and wiggle this until it broke free. Now there's a linkage in this here. This is a terrible design. It's to allow for more capacity, but it's just stamped steel, and it has no bushings, and it's riveted, so it's not serviceable. And this adds a lot of unreliability to this product. This cage does not pivot back, and that's a problem because that makes it so that when you have to remove the wheel when you get a flat or try to install it, it's pretty hard. And because again, it doesn't swing out of the way, it just has this little pivoting action here, right, which is not intuitive. It's very French. Okay, so I added some lube onto the pivots of the parallelogram, and so this works pretty well. I also added some lubrication to the pivots of the Sun Tour derailleur. It didn't need it because it was well built, but that's taken care of too now. Building a bike on spec, and even bicycle manufacturers like Cannondale get this wrong. So this is a Modolo Flash side pull derailleur, and it doesn't play well with a Cannondale. Specifically, the problem with the Modolo Flash is that this uses a 14mm hub wrench to center the brake. However, on the Cannondale, you've got these two rack bosses sticking up, and they get in the way. The other problem is Modolo uses a lot of aluminum, and the place where you don't want wrench flats is when they're made out of aluminum, and that's exactly what they did. So when you try to adjust this, the wrench digs into the wrench flat and rounds it, so it doesn't work well. Okay, and so this goes both ways, right? When you specify a part on a bike, you need to make sure that it functions well with the bike, but you don't know until you actually put it on, and then you find out that it doesn't work. And likewise with the bicycle manufacturer, you know, they're specifying the part, which is one group, and another group goes and puts it together. So a product manager might be ordering these parts from pressure from the Modolo sales rep, and you put it together, but somebody else is doing it, and they run into this problem here. Right. Or the bike shop does, and they say, oh man, this is really a bad setup. Overall, if you have a chance, replace this with a Sun Tour or a Shimano part, and your problems will be taken care of. You won't have this goofiness here. Okay, there is a lot of friction in the cable, so I'll replace both the cable housing and the cable. I added lube to the adjuster, so the adjuster spins freely, as well as the brake release, so this moves well, and the action on the calipers move well too. All I have to do is figure out how to center this up. This has two screws, one on each end that goes through, but you know, it just doesn't center well. All right, so it has the plastic cable stops, and these seem to be okay in this case. The adjuster on the front I already pre-lubricated, so the adjuster works as well as the release. This one is a little on the stiff side, but it works fine anyway. The ST500 has a little pump peg here, so if you have a frame pump, that'll go this whole length. Silca makes that, and several others too, like Ravix, that are pretty good quality. The handlebar foam I removed, and some of it stuck to the bar, so I'll have to clean that off. The aero brake hoods are still in good condition. They've been stored for such a long time, but it's good rubber, so we'll use that. And I added some lube onto the Sun Tour bar cons, so they shift. I tried practicing shifting with this. There's a lot of friction in here, so we'll do the same thing with the new bike. I removed the tires earlier, as well as the rim tape, and so we can go straight to truing this, and then then reinstall rim tape and the Marathon tires. On the rear, before I take this off again, I'll get my calipers and measure the frame spacing to the rim to make sure that you know, the dish is correct. Otherwise, I'll fix it before I reinstall this again. These Wolber rims have rivets on them. They're eyelets, and that makes it particularly strong and resistant to getting pulled out. I haven't added any lube to the seat tube yet to prevent these from fusing together. The headset, when we remove the wheels, then that'll be the time to service the upper and lower stack of the headset. The fork on this bike is chromalloy steel. It's not aluminum, so this is a very strong fork. It's not going to fail on you. Okay, I'll service the pedals. I'll probably just remove them and then add some oil into the access hole here, or remove the cap, add oil, and then tilt them vertically and let the oil drain through the through the axle out the other end and then just clean up the mess. Okay, the sticker says that this bike was sold from Bicycle Outfitters in Los Altos. I was just in Los Altos over the weekend teaching a middle school's bike skills class, and that is a top-rated bike shop. They've been around for a long time. So you can see that this eyelet here has a hole, and then there's a ring on the inside. That is a pressed in steel thread, and so this is a really nice feature because it's not likely to strip out putting a screw in to aluminum material. Now you've got steel to steel contact, so that's a good feature. The spacing between the rim, outside of the rim to the frame, if I use my calipers, this on the right side is 8.54 millimeters, 8.5 millimeters. On the other side, it's 10 millimeters, right? So that's 10.3, so that's about a 3 millimeter gap, thereabouts. And so it might be a little, might not be, or around 9, now I get around 9.2. Somewhat difficult to measure. So, but I suspect that this dishing is fine. I'm not going to mess around with it, and we'll check it once we see how it fits once we put the marathons on it. And if I need to make an adjustment, I'll do so then. On the handlebars, I've got some remnants of the foam tape that stuck on it, so I'll just try to peel it off and clean it up there. Alright, so I've got the rear wheel in the V's on the truing stand. Make sure that they're centered. And the right side of the wheel is on my right side and the left side is on the left side. And I've got the feeler gauge. I'll bring this in and we'll carefully spin this until it touches. Bring this lower. There's a slight untrueness to it. This wheel is pretty good as it is, but let's just take out this part here. So we're going to creep up on the bend. It's a fairly large one. We'll work on this one first. So it's rubbing on the non-drive side, so I'll back up, clamp the spoke on the drive side, and give this a very slight twist, maybe a 1/16 of a turn on every spoke on the drive side. And then I'm looking down here at the space and I can see it start to ramp up here. So on the non-drive side, I'll loosen this an equal amount, which is counterclockwise. So when you ride, the more you ride a bike, the looser the spokes get, right? But this bike has not been ridden very much. Okay, let's squeeze the spoke pairs to get them stress relieved. Now these spokes are galvanized steel spokes. They're before the day of stainless steel spokes. Okay, so this is good. Here's a little rub here. So we'll creep up on it. On this side I'll give it a small 1/16 of a turn. and once here. I clamp the spokes because I don't want the spoke to twist while I'm adjusting the tension. That doesn't help. So it's still here. All right, so that's good. Let's move on to the next wheel. Incidentally, if there was rust that you wanted to clean off that you couldn't get while it's on the bike, now's a good time to do that. And so with your wire brush, you can just brush all around it. And you can brush around in both directions and let the ratcheting help you out. Incidentally, if you want to, now's a good time to service the free hub here. And what you do is you get some lube and you squirt it on the outside of the body of the free hub, and it'll soak in through the bearing mating surface. And if this is dry, when you add some, you'll hear it start to slosh around. The bearing and the ratchets will start to make a different sound. And when that happens, then add a little bit more, rotate it, and then lean it up so that the fluid drains back out again. Okay, and if it drains out on the drive side, that's better, because then you won't have to clean up the mess on the inside of the hub. This is the drive side on the right side. It has a different frame spacings locked over in that spacing, so we'll place this gently in the V's, make sure it's down all the way, and then lock it down. Okay, and you can hear a little bit of rub. This happens to occur on the drive side. So it's right here. And so we'll pull the wheel to the left. So it's right here near the valve stem. So we'll clamp this side and we'll tighten the non-drive side spokes a little bit. Let's say, just make sure that it's the same increment all the way around. Then you don't risk having a lopsided wheel. And you can hear the threads cracking. If we didn't clamp this, then the whole spoke would be twisting. And when you think you're tightening the spoke, all you're doing is twisting it. Okay, so let's come back here and squeeze some of these spokes. And these are galvanized steel spokes too. And some of those sounds that you hear might be just the individual spokes as it goes through the rim, so that's not a problem. So this is good. It's a very minor chewing, not really needed, but we're doing it anyway. Okay, I removed the rim tape and brushed the inside, and so we're ready now to put on new rim tape and melt a new hole. And this has some writing from the person who built the wheel on it back in 1985. So to put on the rim tape, I'm using 19mm wide Schreiber rim tape, and I use this because it doesn't creep and it's thin. It does a good job to prevent the spokes from damaging the tube. So you find the end. This is a fabric We'll start at the valve hole, center up the fabric, and then we'll just roll it around. Let me make sure this is in the frame. Yeah, right. And then we'll just roll this around as it centers up. We'll use only one layer. That's all you need. This tape doesn't wrinkle either, and it does stretch a little bit, so it's kind of nice. So pull out a long stretch of this and work it around. Try to keep it in the center of the rim, and then we'll overlap it by an inch or so. Then run your finger along this to get it seated, and make sure none of the spoke nipples are exposed. I have here a USB powered battery powered soldering iron. So the temperature of this is controlled by the number of times you press this. To set the temperature, you press it 3 times. Different color LEDs tell you the temperature, and I'm running in the highest temperature, which is red. So then when it's hot, it'll start flashing. You might need to do this a couple of cycles, and then we can melt our pilot hole through the rim and work this all the way around. There you go. It should look like this right here. Sometimes you might be getting holes in your tube, and they're right at the valve stem where they're not repairable. So what I do is I cut a little piece of old inner tube material and punch a hole in it, and use that as a gasket for your valve stem. So I just put them in a pill jar, and everybody can access this. This is a new set of Schreiber Marathon tires, and I partially inflated the tires or the tubes already, and there's a direction to this moving forward. I have the valve stem in line with one of the labels. It has the stem gasket on it, and so holding it this way, if we know that the tire direction is forward, then, and there might be an arrow on it, but just look at the pattern on the tread. It's really for appearances only. You've got the adjustable quick release on your right hand side, and so we can do this all in one operation if we're fortunate. So we'll get the one bead on the tire, and then we'll get the tube seated on the rim. Right, and then we can begin getting the second bead on the rim. Since this tube is partially inflated, we'll need to let some of the air out. And this tube keeps popping out because this is a new tires, so let me let out the air pressure on this. And try to roll this on The newer Marathons are pretty tight. And so let me get a tire lever. This is the Schreiber tire levers. They're pretty good. They're thin. They're very strong. Right, this is not going to work, so let me show you another tool that I have. All right, I can tell off the bat this is going to be very tight, and the newer version of Marathon is a tubeless tire, right? And so if you force the issue with tire levers, you're going to risk puncturing the tube. And so you need to have something like a tire bead jack. And the way this works, let me make sure you can see this. The way this works is there's a hook, a groove here for putting it in the rim, and then there's a hook here to catch the bead of the tire. And so you literally crowbar the bead up, okay, and that eliminates the risk of damaging the tube. Okay, the bad part is if you need this to install the tire and you're touring or you're on the road, you know, it's just another piece of equipment that you have to carry, because your tire lever is no longer able to do the job. And this is, you know, not something you can just keep in your pocket. So I've tried others. Cool Stop makes one, but for some reason it doesn't work nearly as well as this, and I picked this one up on AliExpress or Temu.com. Okay, so when we inflate this, we'll push the valve in, and then the valve will naturally pop back out, and that'll give us a good seat. All right. Yeah, so if you're touring, make sure you buy one of these. You never know if you do get a flat on Marathons, and I've had some. You can thank me later. Okay, so I just installed the rim tape on the rear wheel, and we'll press this down. And then I'll heat up the soldering iron. 5 clicks will turn this on. Okay, all right, let's try it now. Yep, it's hot enough. So here's our pilot hole. And melt around the fabric. The benefits of melting it with a soldering iron or a hot nail is that you're not risking using a knife or scissors and create a burr that will later on damage your tube. Okay, so that's that. And let's go about installing the tire. Okay. So this is forward, the forward pattern. So we'll insert the valve stem. Get one of the beads on the tire first. Okay. And we'll work around getting the tube on the rim. Let me shove the valve stem to the casing. Then I can pull it down and it'll lock it in place. And then we can use our thumbs on both sides to seat the upper bead. This is really tight. Okay, and let me use the bead jack to finish the job. All right, there, that's good. Okay. When you inflate this, if there's a lump in it, then you might need to put some soapy water on the outside, let the air out, and then massage the tire and then pump it back up again. The soap will act as a lubricant so that the tire will seat. Okay, so I have 60 pounds of pressure installed in this, and give the tire a spin and look at the top and see if there's a bump or if there's bulges on the side. If there is, let the air out, try to reseat the bead and try again. This one looks good, so I can install more air pressure later, but this looks good. Let's try the next tire. Okay, so I just installed 60 psi of air pressure in this. Looking with just one of my eyes, this is mounted well. It's nice and uniform. Okay. To service a quick release like this one, and this has been in storage for a long time, you want to put a drop of oil on the end of the skewer so that the threads on the variable side is lubricated. Okay, and then on the lever side, just put a drop of oil on each side of the lever. Right. And then you're good. Okay, that's all the service that a quick release needs. So do this on both front and rear. Okay, before servicing the headset, make sure you put a towel on your work surface so that any loose ball bearings that fall out will stay on the towel instead of rolling away. I've got a 6mm wrench to unscrew the binder bolt for the handlebar. And you might need to use a block of wood to pound the binder bolt down to release the wedge nut. Okay, make sure that there's lubrication on the handlebar stem here, and there is. That's good. Bring this down. You may need to place a block of wood underneath the frame to keep it level. This headset uses a 32mm wrench. Sometimes you can use a 14 or 15-inch adjustable wrench, or you might need to keep the front wheel on the bike also. Let's see if I can loosen this. I'm going to tie up the front wheel to the frame so that the fork doesn't rotate while I'm trying to loosen this lock nut. All right, there we go. The lock nut needs to be tight, but not as tight as it was. All right, so let's remove all of this stuff here, and I'll take off the wheel. Okay, and then I'm pushing up in this direction, upwards. We have a slotted screw that has a keyway in it, so it only fits in one way. I'll remove the top stack We'll take a look at the bearings. The bearings have a nice amount of lube in it still, but I'll add some more grease to it. It looks clean. It's in a cage. The most important is down here at this end, and we'll add some more, we'll pack some more grease in it here too. So this was, so you can use automotive grease, that works just fine. It's inexpensive. It's readily available. I'm not going to bother to clean these bearings because this bike doesn't have very many miles on it. So I'll just add some more fresh grease to this. A one pound container of automotive multi-purpose grease will last you about 40 or 50 years. So don't worry about skimping there. By the time you use it up, you're going to be very old. Okay, here we go. So we'll screw this in so that it's hand tight. Roll it around so that there is no binding. Okay, we'll put in the keyed washer, and the keyway on this is in the back. Then we'll put in the adjustable nut. And if there's a lot of dirt here, now's it, before you take it apart, you know, go over it with a wire brush to remove all the debris. Okay, so put this away. I can tighten this up some more when it's when I have the wheels back on. You want this adjustable nut to be tight enough so it doesn't rattle loose. This is a park wrench, and this one is a little bit out of spec. It's a new wrench, but it's a little too large. It's maybe a half a millimeter too large as a 32. So this is not a good one. Okay. Okay, let's move to the back here. And on the seat post, let me check this. Yeah, on the seat post, let's loosen the nut, the binder bolt here. Pull out the stem, the seat post, and we'll put a layer inside the seat tube, right? And then when we insert the seat post, the lube will go down. You don't want to necessarily put it out here because it's just going to goop up on the outside. I'll insert this a little bit because it's going to go back on the repair stand. And so I need enough space for the clamp to fit onto this. All right. And let's come back up here and we'll install the handlebar back in. While we're at it, put some grease on this wedge bolt. Smear some around. We'll insert this. There's a minimum insertion depth, but you know, we can exceed that by a little bit. A lot of these handlebars are a little too low anyway. Okay, we'll tighten this up. So here's something to know. Since this is an aluminum frame, the tubing all around is a larger diameter. They need that because the aluminum is weak when compared to high tensile steel or tool steel like chrome alloy. You can see how much effort Cannondale had to go through to prove their point that you can make a frame out of aluminum. They used a lot of welding here, right? They used a lot of very large fillet welds around these tabs for a rack mount. There's a huge amount of fillet here. This is an excessive amount of fillet if this were steel, right? But perhaps they need to do that just to make this strong enough for compared to a steel touring bike. If we look down here at the dropouts, this is a very large fillet by today's standards, and so they must have gone through a lot of work to try to beef up their construction to make it comparable to a steel bike. So being a good bike mechanic, I've got a good supply of 6mm diameter fasteners. Including that is the cylindrical or washers. And right off the bat, what you can do is, when you compare this to the Modolo, is the Modolos are very thin, right? And so that's like cost reduced. But the radius doesn't seem that much different, right? It's just that they're really thin. They're like cheap. Well, let's take this onto the bike and see how this fits. Alright, so here's a traditional washer, and it looks like, looking at the side, yeah, this diameter does work, right? So they used a standard diameter of aluminum on the bridge here. So why don't I just pull from a couple from my stock. Alright, so I have a thin layer of grease on the contact surfaces so that in the future it won't start to squeak. And then I'll tighten this up. And let's get my cone wrench and see if I can twist this. Alright, now it twists. Good. So I should be able to center up this brake now. This is a Huret Duopar Eco. I've taken off the access plate so that you can see a hex nut on the inside. Some of you might have problems because you find that it's difficult to take the wheel off the bike, and it's very hard to put the wheel back on. And you'll notice also that you're not able to pivot the derailleur. It's stuck in place. I wasn't able to get the wheel on the bike because the derailleur wouldn't pivot like it does now. Alright, and so what it was is there's a set screw on the inside of the frame, and if the outer screw is tightened up, this is frozen. So what you do is you loosen the outer screw so that you can pivot the derailleur. Then you start screwing in the set screw so that you have the B-axis rotation, but very little play. So you have to adjust for this a little bit until it's correct. Then you can tighten everything up, and you test it by rotating the derailleur. This is added on complexity. The blue bike I'll have to do the same thing for. Okay, to wire up the Suntour Barcon, I've got a new cable here, and we'll run it through 2 passes of some beeswax. One's on the top, one's on the bottom. These are real thin layers, but a thin layer will act as lubricant. If you make a thick layer, it'll act as glue. So we're going to try using this existing cable housing, and so inspect the ends. This is cut nicely, and this one is fair. So let me get my file and let's square the ends up so that there's no burr. Okay, and I might as well do this one too. Okay, with the Barcon pushed all the way down, then I can get my cable and I can feed it through the hole and it'll come out down here. Okay. And I'll feed this end into the cable housing, pull it through, and that fits right into the bar con. So here's a 5mm cable stop. There's two of them actually. That fits pretty well. And let's see how this goes on the cable end. That looks good too. All right. So I'm going to route the cable on the inside of this brake cable. Put it through the hole. All right. And pull it tight. Okay, that looks pretty good. So we'll reuse this. I'm going to pinch this and see how this feels. See if there's too much friction. And there's some friction, but it doesn't feel bad. All right, so let's continue on, and I'll run the cable underneath the cable guide, through the cable guide down here. Okay, give it a tug, run it above the chain. There's another cable guide here. Okay, get another 5mm ferrule, stick it in here and see if that fits. That looks pretty good. All right, so then what I'm going to do is we won't reuse this existing one because the bend radius is too small. I'll use compressionless cable housing here, and we'll just cut off another length. So I'll just match these up end to end. And all right, well, that last cut didn't work very well, so I'll use my tried and true HKP cable cutters and square off the end. And then we'll measure this. This is a little shorter, but let's see how this fits. Let's see. Let me check to see if a 4mm plastic fitting will get in here. All right, that's good. And will a 4mm fit in here? No. All right, so we'll use a 4mm ferrule on this end, the good end. See if there's any writing on this. There isn't. All right, so we'll slide this in, and this plastic housing makes a good bend radius. So we'll fit this in and get it through here, and I'll unscrew this pinch bolt a little bit so that I can see the holes and feed the cable through the hole. Tighten this nut up. What I'll do now is so I have the cable through the housing. It comes up, loops around, comes in straight. This is not that great. It comes down into the pinch bolt. So to adjust, and there's no barrel adjuster here, and there's no barrel adjuster anywhere in this line. What I'll do is I'll manually push this derailleur in, and so that it's in the chain is on the lowest gear, and I have the bar con pushed down so it's in the highest gear combination. Now what I'll do is I'll tug on this cable, right, so that the slack is taken out of this, and I'll get my 9mm wrench here and tighten this up a little bit so it doesn't feed through cleanly. There's some friction in it. All right, then I'll pull it through. I'm going to pinch this right here at the base with my finger, and I'm going to start pedaling slowly, and I'm going to wiggle my thumb and index finger to let the cable through my finger, and when it drops down into the highest position, then I'm going to tighten up this cable. All right. Now I didn't pre-stretch this cable, so we'll probably have to repeat this. But this is friction shifting, so even if there's some play, it still will work. So now let me pedal, and I'll start shifting and see if we can get to the lowest gear, where we do, and then see if we can shift one at a time. All right, so let's try this again. And what I'll do this time is we're in the lowest gear. I'm going to shift back. I'm going to keep this shifter in the low gear, and I'm going to tug on this and try to make sure everything is seated. All right, then I'm going to change the shifter back into high. Let me loosen this pinch bolt. I'll pull out the slack. There we go. And I'll just pinch the cable and let the spring action of the derailleur and wiggling my thumb and index finger shift it back down into high again. And then I can tighten this up. Okay, now let's try shifting. All right, that's better. All right, so now this is set to factory spec. And if we look, you can see the derailleur starting to pivot. All right. And the whole body should pivot too, and it does. And then we have this linkage, which may or may not pivot, but yeah, this linkage pivots also, so down if it needs more gear. All right. So that's how we set the derailleur back to factory specs. Okay, and what I can do is I can get about 2 or 3 fingers of length, cut the cable off, and of course with better bikes we would silver solder the tip and then wipe off the excess. But here we'll use a crimp and gently using my wire cutter portion on my needle nose pliers, I'll put a couple of crimps into the tip. Okay, and then I'll bend it pointing backwards so it won't interfere with your heel while you're cycling. To keep this housing in place, I've got some electrical tape. I'll tear off a piece and it's routed underneath the handlebar. That's enough here. And so it's going to come straight out, so I'll tape it again here. Okay, now when I use the bar tape to wrap it up, once it gets to this point, the tape will wrap around underneath it so that the tape will come all the way up to the brake lever, and then we'll come straight up on the inside where it'll change directions, and then we'll continue the wrap. Okay, let's rewire the front derailleur. So I'll remove the this crimp. We'll try rounding it first, and then pulling it off. There we go. This way we don't damage the cable, and we might be able to use it again elsewhere. All right. Clean that up using the wire brush. Notice the cable comes out of the top, so we'll remove this. Okay, so we'll pull the cable through out of the cable guide, out of the housing, and notice none of this was taped down before, and then we'll remove the cable. So this cable is largely intact, and we can reuse it if we're able to on another classic bike or something. So this has the classic uncoated steel housing. This end is cut well. This cut is cut pretty well, but let's square it up anyway with our file. And we'll do it on this side too. Okay. Here's the replacement shifter cable. So we'll run 2 strokes of the beeswax on it. I'm not going to do the whole cable because we're not going to use the whole cable. Okay, so from the back here, I'll push the lever all the way down. Push the cable in and try to find the hole that goes right through. Pinch the cable and then pull it to make sure you're correctly routed. Feed in the cable housing. And then I'll put that copper ferrule on this end here, and this will go into the cable stop. Okay, so the cable stop here, feed this through and then seat that in. In the 70s and 80s, the handlebars were set up so that when you're in the drops, they were horizontal and parallel to the ground. Today the handlebars are the reverse, so that the tops of the bars are parallel to the ground, which would make them in line with the top of the stem. And that would make this at an angle. In either case, you want to be able, from your hand position, to easily grab the brake levers, and from while you're in the drops, to grab the brake levers. What we've done is tended to move the brake levers down so that this part is parallel to the top of the handlebar. So to access the clamp, we use a 4mm Allen and shove it in here at the top. Here, and sometimes you don't have enough leverage, so you need to use an adjustable wrench as a handle so that you can break it free. And then you can bring it down. Okay, it would look more like this. And so that the lever is low enough so that from the drops you can grab the lever, and from the hoods you can still brake. So let's tighten this up. And so that looks pretty good. What's unusual about this bike, being a touring bike, is that it has a long stem, and typically on long rides you want the stem to be shorter, as short as possible, because you know, you're going to be tired, and so when you're stretched out it takes more effort, and so this is unusual to have a very long stem. Well, let's get back to the brake levers. So now we have one brake lever adjusted. How do we get the second brake lever to be the same location as the first one? And so what we do is we loosen this first, and we try to bring it down, here I have a board. I'll put a board underneath this so that it's in contact with the ends of the bars. In this case, it's in contact with the bar cons, okay? And then it's going to be in contact with the bottom of one of the brake levers, and the brake lever that we want to set up, we'll just wiggle this one down until now that one touches. All right, and so it's touching here, it's touching here, it's touching here, and now it's touching, right? So verify each point. That one's done. So now we can tighten this one up. And it's just like four legs on a table. The table's not rickety now. Somebody actually sells a tool that mounts up here that swings around to touch the tops of your brake levers. I think they sell it, you know, for whatever they can get for it. But it's really an unnecessary piece of equipment, since you know, you can easily do this with a board, or if the handlebar was not on the bike, put it on the table. So now we're ready to replace the brake cable. Okay, to remove the rear brake cable, we're going to try to salvage this. So we'll loosen the pinch bolt. I'll round out this cable tip, and we'll see if we can knock it out. You never know. All right, there should be some slack in there. And let's see if I can pull this out. This is a larger diameter cable than what fits in this anchor screw. So there we go. It's out. And the sheathing is kind of damaged. That's as expected from putting a too large a diameter cable in a too small of a screw. All right, so we learned a lesson on this one. Is, let me move the camera. Okay, we learned the lesson here is don't remove the cable housing and the cable at the same time. You're going to be in trouble because there's a large cable ferrule underneath this hood. So what we'll do is I'm going to keep this cable housing in place. We're going to push out the cable and replace that. Okay, and then we'll run in a new cable, and then once the cable is in place, then I can pull out the cable housing and try that. And that might not work because I can feel that the sheathing, we have just steel cable here. That means the sheathing here is stuck. Yeah, and there it is. Okay, well, let's pull out let's see if the cable there in place, and well, damn. I guess I'll have to cut the cable. Forget about it. Yeah. All right, so what I'll do is I'll cut the cable here and then cut some cable housing. So at least we have a leader here. Okay. All right, so this is the original housing. Here's some replacement. So let me uncoil this here. And so we'll measure the length so that these two match. Get my cable cutter here, cut this off. And there's a kink in this cable here. So with my needle on those pliers, I'll bend it out so that it snaps off. Didn't snap off. Let's try filing it square and see what happens. Okay, that looks pretty good. This side we have the fold. Let's see if this works its way out. There we go. Cut it off and then square it up again. Terrific. Okay, so we've got two lengths of cable. We've got the printing on this, so when we insert it, it'll be this way, so if it does show, it's still legible. Alright, so I need to open up the tip here so that the cable will go in. Okay. And it comes out, it'll be legible still. So I'll feed this in and get it seated in the, and I'll get a brake cable. I've got two brake cables, so we'll wax both of them at the same time. One layer on top, a thin layer on the bottom. Grab my needle nose pliers. Make sure this is all the way down. Pull out one. Oh, let's just push this through because I can feel it go in. There it goes. Oh, and it's out. Here it is. So we're successful. Run this around this side of the bar. So if you have cables that cross over each other, the convention is the front cables are in front of the rear cables, and the rear cables are behind the front cables. It kind of makes sense once you hear about it, but if nobody tells you, you don't really know. And you know this wrap is correct because when you turn the handlebar all the way and it locks up here, that it's not binding on the cable. And now we can feed the cable through the adjuster here. Alright, so we've got the cable run through. I've got a 5mm ferrule here. The cable goes into this pinch bolt. The problem is there is it's steel on aluminum, and so when you apply the torque on the pinch bolt, the cable will pull through because the cable is chewing through the aluminum. So the anchor bolt, it's a very large square shaft with an aluminum capture washer, and there's a groove in it and it's deformed. So what I'm going to do is reverse this and reinstall it, and hopefully that'll hold the brake cable in place, because it's not likely I'm going to be able to put a round washer in here. I'll put in the the anchor screw, put in the new ferrule. I recut this cable so that it's longer. Also, the original one I found was too short, and we'll feed this through the hole. Okay, then I'll reverse this aluminum washer, get this fake aluminum nut that has a steel nut inside of it. Okay. Put this this in place, pinch that. Get this very tight. I can actually feel the aluminum compress. Okay. Okay. Well, I can already see this aluminum part deforming around the cable. All right, the braking action is better. Let's try centering up the brake. All right, it's no rub, so let's tighten up this side. There's too many adjustments on this brake. All right. Okay, I cut off the cable housing and the cable, pulled it out. The cable housing originally on this is too short, so I'm gonna just cut some new ones. So I'm gonna this housing, get it in place, walk it around, and then dry fit it. So it would be something like where the housing comes in straight like this. Again, we'll cut here. So here's my cut line with my thumb imprint. I'll just cut that off. There's a little kink here, so my cutter, I'll cut that off. This side there's a kink, so I'll cut that side off too. Like that. And we can square it up with the file. There we go. So that there are no burrs. I'll need one 5mm brake ferrule going into the adjuster here. So the first step is let's thread in the new brake housing. leave the original cable in place, but make sure this is in. All right, get my new brake cable, pull out the old one, and carefully try to fish the new one in. We know it's in when it comes out the other side. All right, and that snaps back in place, so that's good. We'll put a new 5mm ferrule on this. Hold that in place, and we'll run on this one we'll run the new housing in front. So I'll do one wrap here. Do another wrap here. Try to get it to match on the other side also. And we'll do another wrap here. The next time I go inside, I'll grab a felt tip marker so we can mark to see how far this will go on the bar tape. Okay, so the front cable needs to go in front of this rear cable, so it would go like this. I need to pull this cable out. So let's see if I can do this. All right. And we'll adjust in the barrel adjuster. Feed this in. See if we can get this one in. It feels reasonably good. All right. So I'll squeeze the calipers. Try to get all this, as much slack as we can out of this. Help pinch the cable, and then let's tighten this up. And I might need to take this apart and reverse that washer again, like I did on the rear. Okay, let's squeeze this to try to get the play out of it. I can feel the cable slip through this binder bolt already. Okay, there. Then I'll get my 14mm and see if we can center up this brake. Oh my God, it's tight. All right, that feels pretty good. Okay, and we'll leave that there for now, and I'll trim this brake cable so it's at the bottom of the adjuster. Put a couple of crimps in there. Wow, this bike is coming along. So let's cut the cable in the back and the rear here. So we'll cut the cable to its maximum extension, which is this brake guard. I'll put this little tip on it, and making sure it's fit well. put a crimp in there, as not so much that it'll. So these tips, you can buy them by the 100 pack on AliExpress or Temu. They cost about $1, so you might as well just buy a whole bunch of those too, right? I have some bar tape here to put on the handlebars, and it's just normal bar tape. It's foam, polyurethane foam with adhesive strip underneath it. Before we start wrapping, I know you're just dying to ask me, it's like, what is the angle that we cut the bar tape so we can start wrapping? And if you've watched any YouTube videos on handlebar wrapping, you know it's all guesswork. They just kind of use a pen and put a line down there and they cut it. Okay, but let me show you a method that you can use that is professional and works every time. So you want to measure how wide this is, and incidentally, bar tape is 3 centimeters wide. And so I've taken some scrap paper and I cut a 3 centimeter wide piece of tape. Okay, and what I'll do is we'll move over to the bike. So I have a little piece of tape on this paper, and we'll just wrap this around, right? And what we're going to do is mark it where it overlaps itself here. Okay, and this is the circumference or the perimeter of the handlebar. Let's go back to the table. So we know what the width of the handlebar, the perimeter of the handlebar is, and this happens to be 8 centimeters. Let's add about 15 millimeters to that, so that would make it 9.5. That's right here. And so we'll try to draw a perpendicular line to it, and from here we'll draw the diagonal from one end to the other. Okay, and then we can cut this off, and we can cut this corner to corner. And guess what? With this overlap, if we were to start here, when we made a wrap using this angle, we would overlap the end here. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to take this handlebar wrap, we're going to wrap clockwise on the right side, and so that means we're going to cut off this part of the handlebar. So that means we're going to, if we put this, when we put this triangle down here like this, we're going to cut off this part of the tape. And so I'm using some red felt marker here, which you might not be able to see, but I'll cut from the corner here to here. And now we're ready to wrap. Alright, so before we wrap, we've got some tape, and the adhesive underneath is always on the handlebar. And so since we have a Barcon shifter right below us here, I'll start right at the top instead of down at the bottom, and that puts the tip of this foam right here. Okay, and then we can carefully overlap this for a good start. Okay, now I'll start wrapping around, and I can see immediately that the adhesive is on the handlebar, and we'll start wrapping, and I'll apply a little pressure to this so that it's tight. Okay, and so the two bevels match on the tape, so we have a minimum amount of lumpiness. This should be about, from the end to the handlebar clamp, there should be around 6 or 7 wraps. So we're at 3 now. So doing it this way eliminates all the guesswork of the angle, right? And we're wrapping clockwise on the right side, counterclockwise on the left side. You might not see it on the handlebar, but I have some pre-cut electrical tape also. Now I'm at the, let me move this. We're at the Barcon shifter cable. So now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. On the 5th, I'm going above the housing and approaching the bottom of the handlebar clamp. Now I'm going to stop here momentarily and let me get my electrical tape. I'm just going to tack it here for right now. So I'm using 3M electrical tape. It has superior adhesive quality to it compared to cheap no-name brands. So you want to take get some tape that matches closely the handlebar tape that you're using and cut a strip of this, and we want to use it to cover the clamp here, right? So I'll peel this back and put this tape down and just cut off the excess. So I'll put down another strip. Here. And you can go ahead and do this ahead of time. On the other side. Okay. You can also use some of the bar tape on the other end here to put it down, but what I find sometimes is it makes a lump. So let me carefully remove this tape. It will tend to tear the your bar tape, so be careful with this. Sometimes you just can't help but to stop. Alright, so this is the final wrap until I get to the bottom of the handlebar brake lever body. Let me peel this back. Let me peel back the brake hood. And now we're at the bottom of the brake lever body, and from here what I'll do is I'm going to go straight up. Okay? And I can see that there's a little gap here where there's the handlebar is showing, so let me get some more tape of a remnant here. And so I'll unwind this, put this right here, wrap this underneath, and then we'll come up. We'll come up and go over the body of the brake lever, and then we'll continue our wrap. And this eliminates the figure 8 bump altogether. And it keeps us on course. Check your work as you come along so that you don't have any bumps and bubbles. And now we're wrapping directly over the brake housing. Now up here we're going to pause again in a little bit. so I can show you how to center up the handlebar. You might have noticed that I've got the front wheel tied down to the frame so that it doesn't move around very much. It stays put instead of twisting. So it takes a little bit of practice to make the tape go around the bend on your handlebars, but it's not that hard. And this might be a good time for me to stop. The adhesive on the handlebar tape will keep the handlebars in place. Now, over here, I wanted to make sure that where the handlebar tape stops is the same on each bar. You can tell by the oxidation on it that whoever wrapped the tape first wrapped on the drive side, the tape stopped at 4.5 centimeters, and on the non-drive side it went to 7.5 centimeters, so it's hardly centered. I decided, well, let's make it at 6.5 centimeters here, and so I put down a red line here with my Sharpie, and at 6.5 centimeters here I marked that. So this is where we'll wrap up to and stop on the left side and on the right side. So let's continue on now, and so I'll keep wrapping here. Check your work. And as we approach our mark, just keep going, okay? And then we're going to overshoot this a little bit, and then we're going to cut it off with our scissors. So we'll cut the square here. Okay, can you see that? So then now what we'll do is I'm going to try to find where maintaining the same angle, all right, and the line here. We know that the stop line is going to be right over here someplace, okay? So if we continue with the angle, and let's say we want it to stop right at this corner here, that will be right here on the perimeter, right? So this is the corner, and we want this line to be cut in this direction. So we'll go back to our triangle here, this triangle that we made, and when we know that the angle is going to be right here. This is very precise, right? This is the wrap. So you don't have to guess it anymore. You can just pre-cut the material when you start, and then cut it here when you end. Now when we finish up, it's perpendicular to the handlebar. Right, but before we tape this down, I've got a black Sharpie here. Unwrap this and color this edge black. It's okay if you miss a little bit, because you're gonna okay, here we go. As a matter of fact, this edge we can color too. Give it a little graffiti. Alright, so it's like this. We'll take the electrical tape that I cut earlier and stuck on the bar. And I'll put it right on the edge of the tape. Okay. And we'll just give it one good. We'll give it a wrap around the very edge. And it's the width of the tape. And with good electrical tape, it's not going it won't unravel while you're using it. Okay? And that's it. There's a little nub right here. I can cut that off with my scissors. There we go. Very professional. So we can do this, repeat this on the other side. Okay, so on the left side, here's the bar tape, and we'll put the triangle up here because we're going to wrap counterclockwise. So move position this so that it's up here at the end, and I'll draw down the line, and that's our cut line there. So I'll take my scissors and carefully cut to the corner. Okay. So this is it. I'll check over the torque on the binder bolt, the headset. Okay. I just already verified the shifting works and the brakes. So this bike is ready for a new owner. So until I see you again, maybe you might want to try to do some cycle camping, and maybe I can make some videos about that. I know somebody asked me how to attach panniers to a rack, and I do know how to do that, as well as how you can buy good panniers with old style hooks and then retrofit them. So until then, happy cycling.